Yo, party people. Okay, March 3rd, number 2. Okay, so if you have not seen the first video, please go back and watch the first video. We're in Hosea chapter 12. We're going to try and finish verses 7 through 14, okay? So let me just go ahead and read those to you. Hosea verses 7, 12 verse 7. A cunning Canaanite, deceitful scales are in his hand. He loves to oppress. And Ephraim said, surely I have become rich. I have found wealth for myself in all my labors. They shall find in me no iniquity that is sin, but I am the Lord your God, ever since the land of Egypt. I will again make you dwell in tents, as in the days of the appointed feast. I have also spoken by the prophets and have multiplied visions. I have given symbols through the witness of the prophets. Though Gilead has idols, surely they are vanity. Though they sacrifice bulls in Gilgal, indeed their altars shall be heaps in the furrows of the field. Jacob fled to the country of Syria. Israel served for a spouse, and for a wife he tended sheep. By a prophet the Lord brought Israel out of Egypt, and by a prophet he was preserved. Ephraim provoked him to anger most bitterly. Therefore his Lord will leave the guilt of his bloodshed upon him and return his reproach upon him. Okay, so that's the end of chapter 12. I just wanted to read the verses before I give you a breakdown. So again, those of you that have not seen my videos, this is the timeline of Israel, right? So here's where the northern kingdom falls to the kingdom of Assyria right here, and that's where Hosea is speaking. So God sent him to the northern kingdom, 10 tribes to the north, 2 tribes down here. These guys are legitimate. These guys are not legitimate. These guys are always in trouble. They're always doing something wrong. So Hosea was sent to them right before their fall to Assyria. Everything is turned on its head. The social infrastructure is completely upside down. The poor are becoming poorer, and the people that have money are taking advantage of the poor. The prophets and the priests are doing things for money. Same thing with judges. The judges are being bribed. Everything is a freaking mess, and they have 2 false areas of worship up there. They think they're doing great because of their wealth. Because under Jeroboam II, they've become very wealthy. But all the prophets are coming to them saying, you were about to go into captivity. Wake up, come back to God, because they're so far away from God. So here, what you're seeing, the last video I went through verses 1 through 6 for chapter 12. So here in verse 7, it says, this is God speaking. It's in parentheses. A cunning Canaanite, deceitful scales are in his hand. He loves to oppress. So he's calling them that out there because the Canaanites were known for being the merchants, right? But they were known for being crooked merchants. So he's calling them crooked merchants. He's calling them Canaanites. Deceitful scales are in your hand, and he's calling out their wicked practices, right? They're cheating their brothers and sisters in their society and making money off of them, right? Especially the poor. And then it says he loves to oppress. So they're not doing this on accident. It's not like they got a scale and the scale was off and they need to fix the scale or whatever. They're oppressing, and they're loving the oppression because they're making money. Then it says in verse 8, and Ephraim said, so now God is saying what Ephraim, the northern kingdom, is saying about themselves. Surely I have become rich. I have found wealth for myself. In all my labors, they shall find in me no iniquity that is sin. So he's saying, so what they're saying, what the commentary was saying, is that they are at some level recognizing that, yes, we are making a lot of money, and there may have been a few mistakes here and there. There may have been a little bit of cheating, but not enough that really matters. So that's what they're thinking, and that's how they're operating, okay? And they're thinking that God doesn't see that. Like that God doesn't see their heart, right? Not only does he see the repercussions of what they're doing, but he sees their heart. He sees what they're doing. And then verse 9 says, now this is God speaking, but I am the Lord your God, ever since the land of Egypt. I will again make you dwell in tents, as in the days of the appointed feast. So what he's saying there is, remember, in the midst of their prosperity, they're still doing the feast, like the feast of, and he's referring specifically to the Feast of Tabernacles here. So they're still having all their normal feast days, and they're still worshiping God. They're going to these false places of worship and pretending like they're worshiping God, but they're bringing in all of this idolatrous stuff at the same time, right? Canaanite practices, Baal practices, all this perverted stuff that they're bringing in and pretending like they're still worshiping God. And so he's saying that in the midst of their pretending like they're having the Feast of Tabernacles, right? Where they would dwell in little tents and, they'd be celebrating wonderfully in the midst of their prosperity. It says, I will again make you dwell in tents, as in the days of the appointed feast. So in what they're celebrating in and what they're rejoicing in the midst of their doing evil and doing bad things to their fellow Jewish neighbors, they're going to be actually living in tents like they used to dwell in tents, right? Not as in celebration, but as in because they're struggling. And like when they were going through the desert with Moses, right? So verse 10 says, I have also spoken, this is God speaking, I have also spoken by the prophets and have multiplied visions. I have given symbols through the witness of the prophets. So he's saying they're not listening to the prophets. So not only is he speaking through Hosea, he spoke through Amos, he spoke through Elisha and Elijah and everybody before them to the northern kingdom, and none of them are listening. And then, now that's the end of God speaking. Now this is the prophet. Though Gilead has idols, surely they are vanity. Though they sacrifice bulls in Gilgal, indeed their altars shall be heaps in the furrows of the field. So here he's describing, of course, their idolatrous practices, right? They've got these two false places of worship, and doesn't matter how they worship, how much they're pretending like they're worshiping God. God knows they're not worshiping Him. And then it talks about how their altars, which were heaps of stones, would be actually heaps in the furrows of the field, which is awesome. He's using natural things to describe the consequences of their sin, right? So the commentary talked about how when the farmers go out to cultivate a new field, they would have to go through, it would take them a lot of time to take out all the rocks, and they would have heaps of rocks. Well, it was similar kind of, that's how he's describing their altars, and that's their altars are going to be like when it's all done. So verse 12 says, Jacob fled to the country of Syria. Israel served for a spouse, and for a wife he tended sheep. By a prophet the Lord brought Israel out of Egypt, and by a prophet he was preserved. So again, he's referring them back to Jacob. When Jacob had to run from his brother Esau, he ran to the country of Syria, and how he served for he had to serve his Laban, his uncle, and he was being tricked all the time, and he was being cheated all the time, and to get his wife, right? Well, now this is what they're doing to God, right? He's saying, you guys are acting just like Jacob, what Jacob experienced, and some of Jacob's personality. This is what's coming out of them as well. But then he says, but that's not how God works, right? Because God says in verse 13, by a prophet the Lord brought Israel out of Egypt, and by a prophet he was preserved. So by Moses he brought them out of captivity. So Jacob went into captivity to try and find a bride, and God very easily brought them out of captivity, right? No problem. He didn't have any trouble doing it. And by a prophet he was preserved. Ephraim provoked him to anger most bitterly. Therefore his Lord will leave the guilt of his bloodshed upon him and return his reproach upon him. So Ephraim, again, is the northern kingdom, provoked him, which is God, to anger most bitterly. Therefore his Lord will leave the guilt of his bloodshed upon him and return his reproach upon him. And so it's just sad to see it says provoked him to anger most bitterly. So God is just so, it just breaks God's heart to see this kind of behavior. So that's the end of chapter 12 in Hosea. So we got through it in 2 videos, not too bad. So we will we'll start 13 tomorrow. So remember, there's no way to the Father but through Jesus Christ. He's the only way. You can't get there by good works. You can't get there by doing some weird ceremony. The only way you can get there is through what Christ did. It's not about what we do, it's about what he did on the cross, right? We lost our relationship with God in the Garden of Eden through Adam and Eve and the deception that Lucifer instigated, and God sent his only son to come, and Jesus agreed to come down here to change everything so that we would have access to the Father. Tamara just put out a really good video about the realities of hell, and it really shook me up. I was just like, dang. I mean, we don't often think about hell, but hell is real. Listen, you don't have to understand everything, but just recognize that there's no way to the Father but through Jesus Christ. And all you have to do is say, Jesus, I give you my life, and you're in. That's all it is. And then get a Bible, start reading the Bible. You cannot know God without reading the Bible. I don't care how long you've been a Christian. If you're not reading your Bible, you do not know God, period. You cannot rely on other people's teachings. Get a Bible and start reading the Bible. It's hard at first because you're not going to understand it. I use the New King James Version. Get whatever you're comfortable with. A lot of people say the only best version is going to be the King James. But get something and get a good commentary to help you understand what you're reading, all right? So just start somewhere. And you're in, and you cannot lose your salvation, all right? All right. Read your Bible. Jesus is coming. Peace. See you tomorrow.